everyone. Welcome to the Trail Talk Highpointing podcast. I'm your host, Lauren, and the high pointer we're speaking with today is Scott from Texas. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lauren. Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell all the listeners a little bit about how you got started in the outdoors and what got you highpointing?
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town in West Texas and then ended up spending half my life in Arizona. And I was actually born in New Mexico. So I'm a Southwest desert rat through and through my whole life. And especially being in Arizona all those years, had the mountains in my backyard.
Where in
Literally.
Arizona?
Tucson.
Beautiful.
And I lived right up against the mountains there, the Catalina Mountains, and I had 9,000 foot peaks right on my back door. So, tons of hiking at my disposal there, and kind of fell in love with hiking and ended up by accident falling into the high pointer group or the goal chasing of high point. I kind of fell into that just by accident because we signed up to do our first big mountain ever was Rainier, and we used Humphreys as a training up in Flag, and we ended up doing that. And so that's where I kind of had the idea of a high pointers club or a high pointing goal. And yeah, and so that's how it all started. And I kind of set it aside for a number of years and then picked it back up about 4 years ago. And I decided to make it a goal to do all 50. So
when you say we, who else do you high point with?
Oh, just a lot of friends, local buddies there in Tucson. Now I have a good friend of mine. He's a coworker of mine, and I kind of got him involved in it. And he's gone with me now on 6, 7 big ones. And I've done about half of them with my wife and my daughter, my 2 girls, and about a third of them solo. So
yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
Now, so you said Humphreys was your first high point there in Arizona.
Humphreys was the first. So yeah, we were training on Humphreys just to gain elevation. So we would drive from Tucson to Flagstaff, and just for the elevation gain, we were quote unquote training for Rainier by using Humphreys. And it was my first one. Let me back up. I had climbed Guadalupe Peak when I was a kid, when I was probably 7. Yeah, just because we're native Texans and we just wanted to hike the Texas High Peak, and we went out there one year as kids and we hiked it. But of course, I didn't know it was. I just knew it was the high point of Texas when I was young. But when we started training for Rainier, I did Humphreys probably 4 times. We would just drive up there on the weekends and hike it. The guys we ended up climbing together with on Rainier, and so then I did Rainier, and I didn't even know I knew I had 3 high points, but I didn't realize, hey, this is a goal people set for themselves. I had no idea of that community ever. And so when I found out about the community, I found it by accident. I was Googling like who all's climbed the state points, the 50 high points. And I had no idea there was a whole community of these people out there. So I started doing a little research and I was like, oh, wow, there's a whole group of these crazies like me who think this is a grand idea. And yeah, so I joined the club immediately, and then I found the Facebook page, and yeah, that's how I joined. It was pure accident. I stumbled into it. So
yeah, a lot of people do. They are just going on a hike and then they see the benchmark.
I had no idea it was out there.
Now, Rainier was your second. That's a big one.
Rainier was my second one. Yeah, we've done a lot of the southern Arizona peaks and the Mogollon Rim area, high peaks, and of course Humphreys.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, beautiful state, beautiful area. Yeah. But the 4 of us who ended up going to Rainier, and this was in 2007, we had never climbed a big mountain. So we all kind of came to the consensus, hey, let's do one big mountain and see how it goes and see what the experience is like. And at least we can say we did one. And so we went and we did it guided. And 3 of the 4, we all 4 completed it. And 3 of the 4 guys have never been on big mountain since. They got that itch scratched, and they said, "No, this isn't for me." The crampons and the ropes and the crevasses, and I loved it. I
Yeah.
honestly loved the climb, but I didn't know anybody in the community, and so I kind of set it aside. I did a lot of traveling and a lot of hunting overseas and tourist stuff overseas. But I always had that bucket list feeling in the back of my mind. Hey, I want to go back to this. And what really prompted me was COVID, because it changed the world so drastically for all of us that it made me realize, hey, a lot of these things that I keep putting off year to year and say I'm going to do later, they could get taken from us at any moment. And so I decided, okay, I'm done putting this stuff off. I'm going to go for it. And so the first thing I did, I signed up and climbed Kilimanjaro. And so
Wow.
I've always wanted to climb Kili. And so I signed up, and that was what got the ball really rolling for me. So
That's an interesting perspective. A lot of people say that when COVID hit, they had more time to travel and there were less crowds. On
I
these
felt the
remote
other way. I
peaks.
felt pressure,
Yeah.
like, hey, this could, this could all end. They could take it. And, maybe I won't be able to go do some of this stuff I want to go do. And so it really lit a fire under me. And, I started off with Kilimanjaro.
How did that go?
Oh, it was great. It was wonderful. It's easy. It's just slow hiking every day. Everything's done for you. It's a very leisurely pace. Beautiful mountain, beautiful area. Wonderful experience. I would do that one again in a heartbeat. I would go back to Kilimanjaro immediately. It was such a fun experience. And
Wow.
I had been to Africa maybe 13 times prior to that. I had lived in South Africa for a year in 2000 when I got out of school. And so I fell in love with Africa, loved it over there. And I've gone back several times. We did our honeymoon in South Africa
Wow.
in
Okay.
'06. So yeah, so I had some experience in Africa, but I always wanted to go see and climb Kilimanjaro. So that was the first thing I did when, okay, I'm going to set this goal and I'm really going to start getting after it a little bit. And so, yeah, Kilimanjaro was the first one, and it lit the fire back in me. So
So the
it
elevation
was,
wasn't a problem.
it was the last night. So that was,
Okay.
I've climbed some bigger mountains since Kilimanjaro. Um, but that last night at high camp on Kili was the most altitude sick I'd ever been. Just because you go up at a more rapid pace than you do on these other big mountains, they kind of rush you up it, and you just don't get quite enough time to acclimatize properly. And it hammered me that last night. Nausea,
How was
the
it?
typical
Was it?
stuff,
Oh, okay.
nausea,
Okay.
headaches. Yeah. Anytime you rolled over in your sleeping bag, you get nauseated, and it was not a pleasant experience. So, but I made it. I mean, once I got up
Yeah.
and had a couple of cups of coffee and had some oatmeal, uh, I did start feeling better. And yeah, it's a straightforward climb. There's nothing technical about Kili, but it is definitely high altitude, and you feel it. So beautiful area though.
What was your favorite part of the mountain? I understand you go through different like climate zones.
I actually love the most out of all of it was the summit morning. It's so beautiful up there on that crater rim, because when you top out, you've still got like maybe 3/4 of a mile to go around the edge of the rim before you actually get to the peak, the actual summit tip. And just walking on that crater, the cone, was incredible, beautiful.
Well,
So
yeah.
yeah, it was a great experience. Highly recommended.
Wow. And so I mean, that's not a technical climb, as you said, but it did
It is
give you some
not.
altitude experience. So what came after that in terms of big mountains?
I immediately came home. I'm living in San Antonio at the time right now. And so I knew that you can fly from San Antonio to Mexico City direct in about 90 minutes. And so
Oh,
my first goal was, when I came back home, I'd like to go down and start climbing some of the volcanoes down in Mexico, just because they're close. There's not a whole lot of travel
yeah.
involved. And so the same year, about 4 months after I came off Kilimanjaro, I went down and I climbed Orizaba, and
Mm-hmm.
that was another wonderful. And it's a little lower than Kilimanjaro, but it's still 18,500, I think, close to there. And so I did that one next. And that was in 2022, May of 2022.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Now
Another
you
highly recommended mountain for sure. If you've never done any of the volcanoes in Mexico, they're great.
right, and I
Hospitality's good.
understand
Yeah.
that you if you want to summit Denali, you do need some of those mountains under your belt, like
Exactly. Yeah. I was using
Kilimanjaro
those
or
as exactly. I was using those as my resume, I guess you could call it, to start
yeah.
preparing myself to climb Denali. Yeah. So I
And
did that one, and then I went back and climbed Ixta the following spring of 23, Ixtacihuatl, and
okay.
it's 17,200. It's high as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. What guiding company did you use for the Mexican volcanoes?
A local company. His name is Juan. Oh, you got me. You caught me on the spot here. Juan. He's a guide who works for another guy named Robert Garcia, and Robert Garcia, his nickname is El Oso, the bear. And
Hmm.
off the top of my head, I can't think of Juan's. I think it's Velasquez. Juan Velasquez. It was his guide. So it was a local Mexican guiding company, and
Okay.
Juan. He was my guide on Orizaba. And you can climb that mountain solo. You can do it unguided, but just logistics
Okay.
wise, getting picked up in Mexico City, driven to the mountain because the mountain was about 3.5, 4 hours from Mexico City. It just made more sense to use a guide in that situation. Ease of getting picked up, taken to the mountain, your food's taken care of, lodging at the base of the mountain. So I did go guided on that one too. But again, great experience, wonderful, loved it. So I
Did you
actually I have an
experience?
itch to go back to go climb Malinche this spring. It's
Oh
I think
yeah,
it's about
yeah.
I think it's about as high as Rainier. It's about 14.5, 14.4, and so I
Hmm.
think I'm gonna go give that one a go this spring.
I used to live in Mexico, and I think the only this was a long time ago before I was like high pointing really. And the only peak that I climbed while I was out there was Nevado de Toluca, which is just
Hmm.
outside of Mexico City. It's a little over 15,000 feet. When we got to the top, we saw a soccer team practicing up there,
Oh
which is
wow,
pretty good
yeah,
training.
yeah.
Yeah.
Those guys are so lucky. If you live in Mexico City or Puebla, that's a pretty great place to live if you're a climber. You live at 7,000 feet. I think
Yeah.
Puebla is even a little higher
Mhm.
than that. I mean, yeah, those guys, they live at some nice altitude
Yeah.
to be a mountaineer. So, yeah, but it's a great
Yeah, for
location.
sure.
I
And then
love
I ran the Mexico City Marathon
Oh,
2 years
wow.
ago. But at the time, I was living in Yuma, Arizona, which is the state low point. It's like
Hmm.
100 feet
Hmm.
elevation. And then I flew to Mexico City directly to 7,000 feet and ran a marathon there.
Wow.
It's supposed to be the other way around. You know, you
Yeah.
train high, you run
Yeah.
low, but
Did you
I did
complete
my
it?
best. Of course I did.
Nice. Nice. Anybody that can
Yeah.
run 26 miles has my respect. So I am not a
Yeah.
runner.
It it is my favorite city in the world. It's so, so beautiful. And
Yeah.
I just have a special connection to the city and the
Yeah.
country. So that's why I went there. Um, well, getting back to high pointing. So did you experience the same altitude issues on the Mexican volcanoes that you did on Kilimanjaro?
No, no, none at all. I don't, for whatever
Mm,
reason. I think on Ixta, I was starting because we went up so fast and so quickly to the summit. I was feeling it on top a little bit, but we were already at the summit of Ixta. And so by the time you could feel it setting in, we turned around and we were heading down. So there was
yeah,
minimal effect, yeah, on that one. But Orizaba, none. It was perfect. So yeah,
that's awesome.
yeah.
Now, I've been following your progress on the Facebook page, and
Hmm.
you've had a very busy summer. So, can you walk us through uh, your high pointing summer and kind of what brought you
Yeah.
out to where you were living?
Yeah, so I took a temporary work assignment up in Washington State, and so I knew I was going to move up there for about a year, and ended up being there, I
Yeah,
think, 13 months. And I literally had Mount Baker in my backyard, and
it's
because it was
amazing.
temporary, I left my family back in Texas. I was up working solo, and so I had a lot of free time, very little responsibilities off work. And so I figured if there was ever a time to try Denali, it would be now. Now's the time. I had the Cascades 5 minutes from my house up there, or at 10 minutes. And so I decided now or never, and I signed up to get on a Denali team, and they accepted me. And I started training in January of 24, and I hiked almost every day until the day Denali, the departure date for Denali came. I was hiking every day before work, on the weekends, with 50 pounds, just getting ready. And then I ended up climbing Baker. Mount Baker was right there. It's 10,700 foot volcano. And I had Baker, quote unquote, in my backyard. I could be at the trailhead of Baker within an hour. And so I climbed Baker twice in preparation for Denali as well. And so then I went and started the Denali adventure in late May. And
Wow.
yeah, we'll talk about Denali as much as you want. I loved it. It was a grand experience. And then I used that I springboarded my training off Denali and my fitness. I was really fit when I came off Denali. And so then we kind of decided to really get after it after Denali. So I had a busy summer this year. Yeah, you're right.
So, what guiding service did you use for Denali?
We used AAI out of Bellingham, and great experience. Yeah, yeah, they were fantastic. Had fantastic guides on the mountain. Everything went exactly according to plan. They were really prompt with their email updates and keeping us posted on everything and what to do. There's so much logistics that come with climbing Denali that they were a huge help in getting everything figured out. So there's so much
Yeah.
gear. Yeah, so they were great. Highly recommended. Great group of guys.
Okay. And what would you say was your biggest challenge on Denali?
Denali. Well, Denali was a long, slow grind. I think that's the best way I can describe it. You're never moving fast. You always have that weight pulling on you, and you're never going too far. All the camps are spaced out just far enough to it's achievable. It's achievable every day. That those small goals, hop skipping up that mountain, and but the hardest for me was actually coming down Denali because we really bombed off Denali. We summited on day 19, and we had to be back at the plane at the base camp to get on the plane on day 21. So we went from camp 4 back to base camp in a single day, 16 hours.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that was the hardest day on Denali for me, was actually coming down, because we went from high camp to base camp in 16 hours. And I had never been that exhausted in my entire life.
Yeah. Did the whole
Yeah.
team move at the same pace, or were there people leading?
So we had 6 of us, myself, and then we had another climber from California named Scott as well. And we had another climber named Cole from North Carolina, where you're at.
Okay.
And then we had another gentleman, and I can't recall where he was from. I want to say New Mexico. And then we had an Irishman and a Japanese climber. So there were 6 of us.
Wow.
Yeah. And the Irishman and the Japanese climber, they bailed out on the trip at Camp 3 on us. The altitude got to them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we ended up getting stuck at high camp camp 3. So 14 camp. We ended up getting stuck at 14 camp for 10 days, waiting. Just waiting for the weather window. It was so windy. It was dangerous frostbite. So we just couldn't go any higher. And we were running out of time. But finally, the high pressure system eased up a little bit and the winds died down just enough. We had blue skies the majority of the time we were on Denali, but it was just the winds. And finally, I think on I think it was day 17, we were able to move to high camp from camp 3, and we spent the night at camp 4 on day 18, and day 19 we summited, and we came back to high camp on day 19, and then day 20, like I said, the 16-hour march down from high camp to base camp, and then day 21 we ended up flying out. So
Wow.
it was it was a wonderful experience. That was, I know you asked your guests a lot of time if they would ever do Denali again,
Hmm.
and I would say within the first 2 weeks of coming off Denali, I would say I would never do it again. But now it's been a few months, I would do it again. It becomes
Yeah.
addicting, you know. The grind
Yeah.
becomes addicting. You find yourself, you end up loving the grind. So, but in the moment, it's not so fun. It's work.
It's the definition of type 2 fun, isn't it? Like in the moment it's
Yes,
not
yes.
fun, but
Denali
afterwards you look back and
defines.
it's like such a great memory.
Yeah, yeah. I had never been so satisfied with myself to touch the top of Denali. It was a wonderful experience. And we
Yeah.
had bluebird skies and the wind was calm. It was still really cold. We probably guessed it at 23, 25 below zero still, but no wind, blue sky. It was like a dream come true to finally hit
Wow.
that mountain. And I did it. A lot of your guests, they wait till 48, 49, 50 to try to tackle Denali. And I didn't want to do that. There's just so many variables that can go wrong on that mountain. I ended up climbing it. It was my 26th high point. I wanted to knock it out as soon as I could. That way, I get it off the bucket list, and that way I can
Right.
everything
No, we're
from
not
Denali
getting any
is
younger.
I put Denali in my rearview mirror. Everything is gravy from there. So
That's right.
that's how I
Yeah.
looked at it. So I tackled it. It was number 26 on the list.
Oh, that's good. That's good. So,
Yeah.
so Denali, you finished Denali and you still have the rest of the summer.
Yeah. So I took that fitness and I was ready to go, and I still had some time off of work. And a fellow coworker of mine, who I got high pointing with me last year, he was he's actually from Virginia, but he's an avid hiker and he's in really good shape. But he ended up he kept poking and prodding at me. He wanted me to take him on a mountain, and so in August of 2023, he and I, just the two of us, I said, let's go do granite together. That'll be a nice introduction for you. Either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. And so he and I, we flew to Bozeman, and we ended up doing it in 4 days, I believe, 3.5, 4 days. We went up the Southwest Ramp on granite in August of 23, just the two of us, and it was like a 4 day trip, round trip. And he fell in love with it. He loved it. He got the bug really bad then. And so after Denali, he and I started making plans. He wanted to do Rainier, and we had permits to climb Rainier, and it was going to be my third time climbing Rainier. But the weather turned really bad on us. It was we were pressing our luck. We were waiting. It was a late season climb, but the crevasses really started collapsing. The snow bridges were falling apart. The ladders were falling into the crevasses up there, and so we called it off the last second. So we changed schedules. He was able to secure us 2 permits on Whitney on a moment's notice. He kept refreshing the page on the permit application.
Nice.
And yeah, see, we got lucky. We got like
Yeah.
2 permits midweek. Somebody had turned them back in. So we snagged them. And so I told him to change his flights, and I'll fly from Washington down to Vegas. We'll meet up. And so we went from Vegas, we drove up and knocked out Nevada's high point, and then drove over to Whitney and knocked Whitney out by the Mountaineers route, which was, I know
Oh
you've been on
yeah.
it. It's phenomenal. It was
Yeah.
beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful
Hmm.
hike.
It is.
Yeah. So we did the Mountaineers route, and then about 2 weeks later, he and I flew to Jackson Hole. We ended up meeting in Jackson Hole. And this one we had been planning for a while was Gannett. And so we flew to Jackson Hole, met up, and tackled Gannett together, and we did that one in 5 days round trip.
Hmm.
And I got to say that was a great mountain, fantastic. So
Yeah.
it,
Whenever I ask
yeah,
people if they could do another one again, some people say Gannett because it was so beautiful. The approach
it's
and
beautiful. Yeah,
climb.
yeah. Just that hike into that mountain is it's such a beautiful country.
Hmm.
Enjoyable. The hike in is it's long, but it's
Yeah.
not hard, particularly difficult. And so you just have this nice, long, leisurely walk through the most beautiful part of Wyoming, and you just get to enjoy being out there for as long as you want. You can do it 5 days, 6 days, 7 days. Um, it was wonderful. We took a couple of fly rods with us, and we were fishing in all the lakes every day on our way up to
Fun.
the mountain. And
Yeah.
those lakes, I mean, every cast we could catch a trout. Just a great time. Beautiful area.
Yeah.
And yeah, so he and I tackled Gannett together, the two of us, and then we came down, drove over to Idaho, and knocked out Bora Peak the day after we came off Gannett. And so that
Okay.
was another big one for me to get off the list. And that one was probably my favorite mountain in the lower 48. I got to say, Idaho's
Really?
Bora was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So what made that your favorite?
Oh, it's just deep enough where it tests you right from the parking lot. It's right from the get go. It goes up that mountain. It just straight up. But it's not so hard you're
Hmm.
climbing. It's just a steep grade hike, and it does not let up the whole time. There's one small break on that mountain where you cross the snow bridge to get on the final push to the summit, and that's your only flat spot on that whole mountain, it seemed like. And Chicken Out Ridge was a lot of fun, a little scrambling up there. It had just enough spiciness and fun to it where it just made it super enjoyable. And what I
Hmm.
found the most enjoyable part about it was you can do it in a day. It has a little bit of enough adrenaline rush to it, but you're not putting in these long preparation days and hours and weeks and all that. It's a day hike, and it has everything you want in a day hike, in my opinion. So I fell in love with. I would love to go back and climb Bora. That one, yeah, definitely
Okay.
one of my favorites. Yeah, and so
Okay.
we
Oh,
knocked
that's
out Bora,
interesting.
and about 3 weeks later, again, I had a little bit of time off, and this one I did solo. I went and flew over to Salt Lake. Well, this is a bit of a story on Kings Peak. I landed at about 10 p.m. in Salt Lake City, rented a car, drove straight to the trailhead, started hiking by myself at about 3:45 a.m., a little maybe 3:30 a.m., and I knocked it out in by myself, car to car, and that was work. I was on zero sleep. So that
Wow.
one, yeah, that one
Oh,
tested me. But
you didn't stay the night once you landed or anything.
no, I went straight to the trailhead and just started going. And I just didn't want to leave one last Western High Peak on my to-do list. I wanted to get them finished, and so I ran over there as quick as I could and climbed Kings, drove over from Salt Lake, climbed Kings, got back to the car, drove back to Salt Lake, and got a quick night's sleep, and then flew back to Washington the next morning. I, was, I just got lucky. I got it done though.
Wow. And then what
Yeah,
about Oregon?
Oregon was a great mountain. Mount Hood was
Mhm.
beautiful. My wife and I used the opportunity. The perfect climbing time was during our anniversary, so my wife and I flew, just the two of us, and we stayed at Timberline, right there at the base of Hood,
Yeah.
that beautiful old
Hmm.
historic hotel. And I climbed it. It was the first quote unquote big mountain I wanted to do solo, so I climbed that one solo. And I went up the traditional way, up the Palmer Field, up the Hogsback, through the pearly gates, and ended up summiting. And I had the whole summit to myself that morning. Beautiful morning,
Wow.
and it was wonderful. Yeah, I was really proud of that one. That was the first, crampons and ice axe by myself. Nobody there to help me,
Hmm.
uh, and had the whole mountain to myself up on the top above the Hogsback. And so I went up through the
That's really
pearly
special.
gates, and spent about 20 minutes up top, and then came down Old Chute and then back down and met my wife in time for lunch back at the hotel.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now, for everyone viewing on YouTube, we can tell that you're a hunter. Um,
Yeah.
so, would you say that hunting has helped you in mountain climbing? I know on like,
Definitely so.
you know, you're like out there for days on end. It's a lot of endurance. It's a lot of
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that kind of test your resilience, isn't there, in hunting?
Yeah. So I love being in the mountains. So I kind of parlayed that over when I'm not mountain climbing. I love mountain hunting. And
Hmm.
so I've been fortunate enough to do some mountain hunting I've been to Azerbaijan, been to Kyrgyzstan twice, Turkey, uh, the Switzerland, uh, northern Italy, Slovenia. So hunting has given me an opportunity to go all over the world, see the globe, meet people from all different places and cultures, and still be able to go enjoy the mountains. Russia, I've been to Russia 3 times over in the Caucasian mountains and been right beside Elbrus, the highest mountain over there in Europe.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's just afforded me a way to travel the world and see and meet new people and still get to enjoy the mountains. That's number one for me. I want to be in the mountains, whether I'm just climbing or if I am hunting. Uh, it keeps me fit, young, looking forward to
Hmm.
another adventure always.
What
So
got you into hunting?
I grew up hunting. Like I said, I grew up in a small West Texas town, and my dad's brother, my grandfather, all my cousins, and they're big into upland hunting, shooting quail behind the
Hmm.
dogs. They're big bird dog guys, Brittany's, pointers,
Hmm.
and so yeah, I was introduced to it at a young age. We would go to Arizona quail hunting every year,
Yeah.
so it was kind of a family tradition. I took it a little further than most of my family with the traveling and going overseas and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a passion.
Hmm. That's awesome. Can you talk about the eastern and southern and midwestern high points that you've done? Any that stand out?
You know, my wife and I, we decided last fall we wanted to do the Southern Six Pack, as they call it. So she and I
Mm.
flew over to Atlanta and we drove, we hit the road and we knocked out the traditional right to left, the counterclockwise six pack, as you call it. We did South Carolina, North Carolina, and Mount Rogers in Virginia. Then we went over to Kentucky. Um, then Tennessee. We spent a day or two in Smoky Mountains National Park. Beautiful area. We went in October too, right when the leaves were changing, so it was
Oh,
beautiful.
beautiful. Hmm.
Yeah, Gatlinburg had the whole city was decked out in fall festival. It was really nice.
Hmm.
And then we finished up in Georgia with the Brasstown Hill and back to Atlanta. So that was my first introduction. We loved it. We had a great time over there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Earlier that summer, I took my wife and daughter. We did a week vacation in South Dakota. We wanted to go to the Black Hills, Rushmore, all that stuff, and so we did those on a kind of a road trip whirlwind. We drove from Texas. We drove up and hit Oklahoma's Point, and then Kansas, Nebraska, and then South Dakota. We
Nice.
did those on a single road trip. That was the girls' first four. That was their introduction to high pointing. So now my
Okay.
wife
Did they
she
like
has
it?
10. My daughter has those four. So
Okay.
um, yeah, I'm gonna take the girls. We're gonna do Guadalupe Peak again when it cools off a little bit here in Texas. Maybe in
Hmm.
January we'll go out. The girls are gonna hike Guadalupe. And yeah, so we've done those. And then the rest of the eastern high points, I was just doing those solo road trips. I would have a spare few days with nothing to do, and I would take off from Texas. And the first trip I went and I drove and I knocked out, oh, what was it? I believe it was Missouri, Arkansas, and Louisiana. I knocked out those three on
Okay.
a quick road. And then right before I was going on that temporary work assignment up in Washington State, I wanted to get 3 more. And so last year, right at the end of the year, I knocked out Mississippi, Alabama, and Florida. And then after that was Denali. So I went from the lowest point on 25 with Florida to the highest point with 26 with Denali. Yeah, it was a little different.
Which
A
one?
little drastic difference in the two hills.
Yeah, yeah. Which one do you want to be your last?
I've made up my mind, I think, on that. So probably next spring we're going to go do Illinois. The wife and I, we've already bought our plane tickets. You can do Illinois
Mhm.
Over President's Weekend, and because
Mhm.
it's private property, and you have to go on those certain times and days. So I think they're opening the gates up for President's Weekend in February. So we're just going to go up and do just Illinois. We're going to make a whole trip just to get that one out of the way because
Yeah,
you're bound by their date, so you can't just pick and choose when you want to go.
right.
But
Mhm.
later in the spring, she and I are going to do a road trip. My wife and I we're going to fly to Indiana. So we're going to do from Indiana all the way east to Rhode Island. So we're going to knock out 10 this coming spring.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we'll get those out of the way. And the last 4, obviously, I've still got Hawaii to do, which we're going to do that one in 26 on our 20-year anniversary. We're gonna go to Hawaii and spend our 20-year
Mhm.
anniversary on the Big Island and check that one off the list. But back to your question, the last one, I think I want to do Katahdin as my last one. So the wife and I have a big
Yeah.
plan. We're going to save Mount Marcy in New York, Mansfield in Vermont, Washington in New Hampshire, and then Katahdin. And so we're planning on we're going to rent an RV or a fifth wheel, and we're going to spend 2 weeks up in New England. Right, we're going to try to time it right when the leaves are changing perfectly. And I don't want to drive up them. I want to climb. I want to hike them all 4,
Mhm.
and just be out there when New England is at its most beautiful. Up there when those leaves are changing, it's the most beautiful place on earth for about a month up there. And so I want to time that timing just right, and just go spend 2 weeks up there and be free to travel with an RV. We can stay wherever we want and just enjoy those beautiful New England mountains and knock out the 50
Yeah.
here in a couple of, yeah, that's the plan.
So once you knock out 50, what's your next list? What are you going to do next?
Oh, I told you I've got the itch kind of for another Denali type adventure. The guys I climbed with on Denali, I know at least one of them, Cole from North Carolina. He said he would be up for the challenge. We're talking about possibly climbing Mount Logan. Since I did Denali and I did
Oh, the
Orizaba, so I've
Canada
got the
High
highest
Point.
mountain in North America.
Yeah.
Excuse me?
The Canada High Point.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
Canadian High Point. And so we were like, well, we've done Denali, we've got North America's high point. We've done Orizaba, we've got the third high point of North America. Let's go get the second one. And so we're flirting with doing Mount Logan possibly in the next year or two. Uh,
Mhm.
but stateside, I think I have the biggest itch right now for me is to do the Grand Teton. I know it's not a
Okay.
high point, but it's almost as high as Gannett. It's right there, but it's such an impressive, beautiful mountain that
Yeah.
it's been
It's
on my
iconic.
bucket list as well for a long time. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just so
Yeah.
beautiful,
You
and
know,
so
there there are some guests on the show who do national park high points because, being
sure,
that we all like lists, it's part of the reason why we get into high
yeah,
points. We like things that we can check off as well as the journey, of course. Um, but as we check off different national parks, we visit the high points of these parks. And so I've had people
yeah,
do the national park high points. Of course, some of our state high points are national park high points, like Rainier or something like
yeah,
that. But
yeah.
I think Grand Teton would probably be, and I don't know this for a fact. I think I did an episode a while ago with John Mitchell about these. I think that Grand Teton is probably the Grand Teton National Park high point.
Oh yeah. Have you been
Yeah.
there? I mean, it is just such an iconic, beautiful peak that as soon as you see it, if
Yeah.
you have any inclination to want to climb mountains, that one just screams. climb.
Yeah.
It's something. Yeah, I've seen it a few times, and I'm like, okay, I gotta throw this one in the mix now before I get too old and I can't climb these mountains anymore. I need to get this one knocked out of the way. So it's high on the bucket
That'd be fun.
list. Logan's another one, like I said, but Logan's one of those 3 week expedition type. A lot of planning, a lot of money involved, uh, but it's there. It's in the back of my mind, itching. So
Hmm.
as well as going down to Ecuador and
Oh,
climbing
those volcanoes. Yeah.
Chimborazo. Yeah, Chimborazo and Cotopaxi. Those are on my bucket list. But I'm really focus oriented right now. I'm finishing this 50. I really want to get this 50 done. I'm so close. Now that I've got the West finished, it's just a matter of setting the time aside and getting this 50. It's like it's project number one right now for me is getting this one done. So
That's fun.
it's such a fun way to see the country. So I've really enjoyed this hobby. So it's a great way to
Hmm.
combine travel. You know, you get to see the whole country, you get to travel, um, and you combine it with either climbing or hiking, whichever mountain you end up doing. You know, some of the small East Coast ones, they're hikes, but they're still
Yeah.
enjoyable. And then, of course, out west, you have the big mountain climbs, and all of them are enjoyable in one form or fashion. You get to see a part of the country you've never seen before. It's a great way to see the states. So,
It is. And I grew up in Illinois and I'd never been out to the Charles Mound area. And I'd never been to Northwest Illinois before I went to the High Point.
you know, I've been in that area before, just across the state line in Iowa. I've got some really good friends up there. They're farmers, and I've gone up there spring turkey hunting and stuff. And I've always wanted to just drive over to Charles Mountain and check it off the list, but it's never open during turkey season when I'm up in the Iowa area. So, so now we have to abide by the rules and go by the landowner's wishes. And so we decided, hey, let's just go up over President's Weekend and get that get that cornfield checked off the list.
Yeah. Random question. The Scot from California that you hiked Denali with, what was his last name?
Hagerman, Halterman, Hagerman. Give me
Halterman?
1 second.
I had
I
Scott
believe
Halterman on
so.
the podcast.
Hold on. Let me look. It's either
Is he
Halterman or
a ski
Hagerman.
patroller in Tahoe?
Yes he is.
Yeah. He was on the show.
Scott Halterman. That's it. Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was
Yeah.
Halterman or Hagerman.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah. He's been on the show.
There we go. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
he's been on the show.
Uh huh.
Yeah, that guy, he's a beast. Yeah, Scott, he's got a wicked dry sense of humor. He's great fun to be around. We had a great
Yeah.
time together on Denali. Yeah, we all got to know each other really
And
well, sitting around Camp 3 for
I'm
10
sure.
days with nothing to do. So,
Yeah.
but
And
yeah,
he lives out
Scott's a
in
great guy. He's
Tahoe.
fun
And
too.
yeah, from what I remember, his kind of like backyard is the Sierras. So
Yeah,
lots of training there for
he
him.
ski
Yeah.
patrols. He's search and
Hmm.
rescue, paramedic, and all that stuff up there in, I believe, the Truckee area, just on the California side.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah, great guy.
it's a small world, isn't it? The high pointing world.
Yeah,
It's small.
yeah, great guy. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
chasing it as well. So the four of us that were remaining on Denali, I think three of the four of us were trying to finish the High Point 50. Scott being one of them, and Cole from North Carolina as well. He was
Yeah.
chasing them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
What are your most memorable Western high points?
Okay, most memorable Western High Points. I love them all. They're all fantastic and fun in one form or fashion or another. But one of my favorite hikes of the 50 on the way to 50 was probably New Mexico. Um, a friend of mine,
I love that.
I grew up with him, one of my best friends since we were kids. He's actually an anesthesiologist and a pilot now. He and I, we jumped on his plane. We flew up to Taos early last spring and we did Wheeler together. And it was one of the most amazing hikes I've ever been on because the night before it had
Mhm.
snowed about 9 inches and then it blew
Oh
through.
my
So we had
gosh.
bluebird skies with no wind and bluebird skies. but fresh powder with nobody had broken trail. We were the first ones on the trail. And so you just
Whoa.
had this beautiful, pristine white mountain ahead of us. And we broke trail the whole way up. And when we got to the top, there was some bighorn sheep up there. And
Yeah.
it was just, yeah, I mean, it was one of the most memorable, beautiful hikes I've ever done in my life was Wheeler, just plain old Wheeler, New Mexico. Ended up being just
Mhm.
a dream hike. Um, that same buddy of mine,
Yeah.
the same year, yeah, we flew up to Elbert and we stayed there in the campsite right at the base, right by the trailhead. And we just had another phenomenal 3 or 4 day weekend up there fishing. And we hiked Elbert together and then Massive as well, which is right next door. We did those back to back, those 14ers. Just a beautiful area.
Mhm.
Lovely. Yeah, I loved it up there. Um,
Yeah.
Nevada was probably my least favorite. it's just kind of a it's
People
just kind of
say
a
that.
small hill out there in the middle of nowhere. It was a beautiful
Yeah.
area, but some mountains are more beautiful than others. Uh, the top obviously is always going to be a toss up in most people's opinion is Gannett and Granite. Those two are just phenomenal areas, beautiful. Just so enjoyable to be in those real wilderness areas and they're real mountains. You have to have some skills to get
Yeah.
up and down them. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I would redo any of them, even like Whitney, the Mountaineers route. I would do that one again in a heartbeat. There isn't really one
Yeah.
of them that I could say that I wouldn't do again. They're all enjoyable in one way or another.
Hmm. And they resemble the state, I think, so well.
Yeah.
Each of
They all have the attributes that you think of in each of those states. Like you said,
Yeah.
Nevada, or like I said, Nevada. It's kind of a dry, dusty, sandy hill, high elevation. California and the Sierra Nevada, that mountain. It's just a beautiful hike into that mountain.
Yeah.
Um, West Texas, you're on the old seafloor bed reef sticking out into the middle of the flat desert. Very
Hmm.
iconic area, Guadalupe's. But New Mexico,
Hmm.
that New Mexico hike will always stand out to me. That's a phenomenal area, beautiful. Um, I would
I agree.
I would love to have
Wheeler's one
that
of my
opportunity again
favorites
to have
too.
that type of a hike on Wheeler. Just kind of a once in a lifetime feeling. So I
Yeah.
what else? I really can't think of any of them that stand out more to me than Wheeler. That one Wheeler hike, Denali, and Bora. I just really enjoyed that mountain. So yeah,
Hmm.
the Western Peaks are so much fun. It's a great experience to get to do them. And I've been lucky so far. I'm batting 1,000. I haven't been turned back on any of them so far.
Oh, okay. So that's another question. Even though you've never been turned back, are there any high points that maybe didn't go according to plan?
No, like I said, I don't know what it is. I've been rolling sevens every time we go to these mountains. We've had some phenomenal luck. I guess that's all you
Yeah.
can call because you can show up. As you know, you can show up as prepared as you can possibly be, and the mountain can still say, "Not today, not
Yeah.
today." And I don't know what it is. We've had a really good streak of just climbing luck and hitting the weather lotteries every time. So
Good.
um, I would say Denali, or excuse me, not Denali, on Rainier, way back in 2007 when it was my first mountain experience. Uh, we had a lenticular cloud blow up over the top of us while we were on top of the mountain. And it went from
Oh, okay.
cold to extremely cold very rapidly. But thank goodness we were already on the summit by the time this weather system hit us, and we had to come down in some wide out, extreme cold wind, 40, 50 mile per hour winds. But luckily, like I said, we were on our way down when this stuff hit us, and
Wow.
yeah, that was about as a close call as I've had in the mountains so far as weather. But it went from beautiful to not so beautiful in a matter of minutes on Rainier. It was incredibly rapid how quick it came in on us. So we beat feet and got off that mountain as quick as we could. because
So
it can get dangerous.
did you have
Yeah, it can
to
get dangerous on Rainier if the weather turns on you.
yeah, did you have to cross the crevasses like over the ladder in whiteout conditions and everything?
Complete whiteout conditions. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a little hair raising, a little fun, a little type 2 fun coming off Rainier that first time. The second time I climbed it, I actually climbed it in the early spring. I did it with a friend, and it was frozen solid. It was very cold, but it was completely just frozen solid in place. It was a very different climb than the first time I did it. It was late June, early July, and the crevasses were really opening up by then. And it was just a
Okay.
different environment. When we went up in March, the second time I climbed it. And again, like I said, it was really cold, but the mountain was super firm. A lot easier climbing if you can deal with the cold. So, but luckily,
Yeah.
like your question, I've been lucky in the mountains so far. I had a bad accident in 2001. Long story. I don't want to bore your listeners, but a long story. I was climbing in New Zealand and I fell 25 feet, being somewhere where I shouldn't have been, and I broke my pelvis and dislocated my hip, and I hurt myself pretty bad over in New Zealand. Um,
Okay.
and luckily, nothing permanent. I was able to come back from the injuries, and nothing long lasting so far. Little arthritis in my hip, but I had to have hip surgery over in New Zealand, and it was it was bad.
Wow.
But
Wow.
yeah, that was many years ago. But yeah, that was the only accident I've ever had in the mountains. Luckily, I learned my lesson on that one. The mountains are to be respected, and
Yeah.
take an extra second to make sure your footholds are good and all that good stuff. It was a life lesson for sure.
Wow. So, what was your favorite high point east of the Mississippi?
I would definitely have to agree with you on this one with the Mount Rogers. It was
Hmm.
uh, it was such a good hike. Just beautiful, pleasurable
Yeah.
place to be on. You get to hike on the Appalachian Trail for a few miles, and again, we did it in October, and the leaves were changing, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful place to be. We loved it. My wife really loved it. So
Hmm.
I can't speak for the other ones because I haven't done the other quote unquote nice hikes of the East Coast, such as
Yeah.
Marcy and Katahdin. So I'm saving those, but I'm sure they're just as beautiful and just as nice.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I
Yeah,
can't wait to hear about your
a lot of
progress.
people say how awesome Katahdin is to walk the knife's edge. It's just a really pleasurable, fun, beautiful place. So um, that's when I
Yeah.
decided, okay, we can save those four. We'll maximize the fun of finishing this 50 with those beautiful four up north. So
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be amazing. Well, my last two questions are the same questions that I ask everybody, and they are how has high pointing and the outdoors enriched your life?
high pointing, as we talked about earlier, high pointing has given me an opportunity to see a lot of the United States that you would
Hmm.
normally never go to. It's a great way to see the country. Um, I'm a desert rat, Southwest boy. I would never normally, in a million years, find myself in the hills of Connecticut or a neighborhood in
Hmm.
Delaware just to find some geological survey marker.
Yeah. Yeah.
It takes you to some strange places. It takes you to some very special places, and so I've really enjoyed the high pointing goal just for that opportunity alone to see the whole country, meet new people. Um, Outdoors has enriched my whole life. My whole life has revolved around outdoors since I was a kid. So it's something it's who I am. Whether I'm out hunting birds with my family, or hiking with my wife or daughter, or climbing Denali with some friends, uh, I have to be outdoors, and it's one of the biggest aspects of my life. It keeps me sane and healthy and happy to always
Hmm.
be in the outdoors as much as I possibly can.
Well, the last question is do you have an outdoor based book, documentary, or podcast that you would recommend to any listeners?
Hmm. Book. I'm a big book guy. I would say the two probably off the top of my head that come to mind would be Touching the Void.
Yeah, that's a
I
good
think
one.
his name is
Hmm.
Joe Simpson is the writer, the author.
Hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's about
Yeah,
two climbers who had a serious accident in the Peruvian Andes. Love that one.
yeah,
That's a true tale of just ultimate survival skills and just luck and an unwitting grit to stay alive. That's incredible to
yeah.
me.
You're right. And
Another
it's
book,
also a movie,
yeah,
and I am normally a,
yeah,
book is better than the movie kind of person, but when you watch the movie, you're able to visualize exactly what they were going through. It's very
yeah,
well described in the book also, but it helped seeing the movie. You can only
yeah,
describe it
yeah.
so much before you're just like, all right, I got to see it.
Yeah, yeah. The movie was good. The book, I fell in love with that book many years ago, and it's just like I said, it's an ultimate survival tale. I love it. Great book. Highly recommend it. Another one would
Mhm.
be Ed Viester's book, No Shortcuts to the Top. I believe
That's a
is the
good one.
top
I
or
like
is
that. Yeah.
the subject. Yeah,
Yeah.
the title of the book. And Ed, the guy's just he's a one in a million type of person. I mean, the guy's
Yeah.
climbing the 14 8,000 meter peaks without oxygen. That's a
Yeah.
special human being to tackle that quest. And
Hmm.
he's a well-spoken individual. He's well-read, and he's a great author. He his books
Yeah.
are phenomenal. Yeah, he's. I've seen him speak one time in person. I went to a
Oh,
talk and
okay.
listened to him. He's a great
Okay.
speaker. A well-rounded guy. Very humble about what he's done. But if you take a step back and you start reading about what he was able to accomplish without oxygen, the guy's just he's he's a climbing superstar. I got to give him credit. So I would highly
Hmm.
recommend anybody to read one of his books as well. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's really inspiring. He was built to do that.
you guy's incredible. He's from Illinois as well, just like you. Just
That's right. It's yeah, I remember him
yeah,
writing about
flat
that. Yeah.
flat corn
Yep.
country guy who just moved to Seattle and decided to get after it and live his dream. And God bless him.
Hmm.
He was able to do it. So you climb some of
Yeah.
those mountains with oxygen. That's an incredible feat. And to do all of them without oxygen is just it's almost
Yeah.
unfathomable what he was able to pull off. So he, like you said, he was built for it.
Yep. Yeah. That's amazing. Those are really good recommendations. Thanks very much. Um,
Yeah,
well, Scott, this has been a lot of fun, and please keep me updated with your Eastern high points, and maybe you can come back and update the listeners too. I can't wait to hear it.
absolutely. Yeah, it's all downhill from here. So, like I said, we've we've got the Midwest and the East Coast up northeast, and that's it, and Hawaii.
Yeah.
So it's all
Yeah.
downhill, and we're looking forward to checking the last ones off the list and finishing this goal. It's been a wonderful, fun goal to strive for, and it's a great community. I've had a lot of fun so far.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invite. I appreciate you, Lauren.